We're all set. Are we live now, Kurt? All right, good evening, everybody. We're going to get started. Thank you for your patience. We had some technical difficulties that we needed to address with our computer, but thank you for joining us tonight. This is our second family and parent and community forum. And I'm just really honored to work with Carol Panegas and the Community Coalition as we co-sponsor these events. And I'm really happy to see a number of people that have joined us here in person, as well as those who have joined us by Zoom who are watching remotely. Tonight's program, of course, is focused on fentanyl. And before I turn it over to Carol to do some introductions, I want to make an introduction of the person who will be taking my place after this year. So our next Granite Falls School Superintendent, Dana Giesland, is right here. So thank you for coming tonight, Dana. And I know that she'd love to spend time and you get to know her during our break or after our event tonight. So Carol, my friend, here you go.
Okay. I'm just so pleased to see everybody here. We all know how important this topic is. And I'm really excited about all the wonderful resources we have in the back. Be sure and check them out. We've got Compassionate Friends of Snohomish County, which they deal with loss and grief. We have Al-Anon, we have the Snow Owl Library, Granite Falls School District, student assistant professional back there, Snohomish County Health District, domestic violence. So, and then Ideal Options I see back there. And the Community Coalition also has a table tonight. We have some, for those of you who would like to have a Narcan to have on hand, we have that to distribute. We also have lock boxes, and so does Snohomish County Health for your medications at home that you need to keep locked up. But before I need to introduce everybody, this is Chelsea Porter. I'm so glad Chelsea's here. She's the one that caused the delay. Chelsea works with the Department of Health, and when we were able to begin distributing Narcan through the coalition, we also got connected with Chelsea, and so we're just really pleased that she's here tonight. We also have Bill Dane from the fire department, and David Hayes, Lieutenant Hayes, with the Snohomish County Sheriff, and Dr. Lambert is here with us tonight, and then Amber Randall is here, and they've all got some things to share with you tonight. We will take about midway through, we will take about a 10-minute break so that you can get up, stretch your legs, use the restroom, or check out the resource tables or grab a cookie, whatever you'd like to do. But anyway, I'm just so pleased to see you all here tonight, and I look forward to our next event. Push this.
Thank you. Who give naloxone out to their communities as well. I'm not sure how. So Carol invited me tonight to talk a little bit about opioids and overdose, and I'm just going to do a quick intro on that subject to start, and then I think the panel is going to speak, and then I'll actually do a demonstration of how to use naloxone. So, sound like a plan? How many people here have been trained on naloxone before? Okay, cool. We have some people in the back. I see you. Cool. Awesome. Well, welcome. Are we going to do questions at the end, Carol? Questions at the end? Yes. Okay, cool. Sounds great. What's that? Oh, and I'm from Granite Falls. I grew up here. My mom's here too. I did go to this middle school, so it feels very surreal to be back when it was a middle school. I'm really happy to be all here with you tonight. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Bridget. So we are going to get started. Hopefully I don't have any more technical issues. So like I said, we're just going to do a really quick overview of opioids and opioid overdose, and we'll talk about naloxone later. And then we can also talk about where you can get naloxone in your area and around the state. And before I start, I just want to acknowledge that this is a really difficult subject. It's a subject that, growing up here, I imagine everybody in this room and across the state has been touched by in one way or another. So really encourage you all to take care of yourself, to take breaks if you need it, to get a cookie, and to hold your loved ones close as we talk about this difficult subject tonight. So getting right into it, opioids are a class of drugs used to relieve pain. They're very effective at pain relief. And opioids can either be pharmaceutically produced, so something that's prescribed to you by your doctor, like oxycodone, oxycontin, methadone, or fentanyl. And they can also be illicitly manufactured, like heroin and fentanyl. So I think it's really important tonight that when we think about fentanyl, we're thinking about illicitly produced fentanyl is the fentanyl that is causing most of the overdoses that we see in Washington and across the country. And that's very different from fentanyl or other medications that are prescribed by a doctor, that are regulated by the FDA, and are really effective and important for managing pain. And very, very simply, an overdose is just when you have too much drugs in your body, too much of any drug. It could be Tylenol, it could be vitamins. You can have an overdose of any substance if there's too much of it in your body. And an overdose occurs when a toxic amount of one or more drugs overwhelms your body. And in the case of an opioid overdose specifically, so like a heroin overdose or a fentanyl overdose, when you have too many opioids in your system, it causes you to stop breathing. And that's all an opioid overdose is at its core, is that somebody has stopped breathing. A person who's experiencing an overdose won't wake up. Like I said, they have slow or no breathing, and they won't respond to external stimuli. So if you shake them, if you say their name, they won't respond to you. That's all it is. As we all know, opioid overdoses can result in death, but the good news is that we have a medication, naloxone. I have two forms of it here that we'll talk about a little bit later. Is very, very, very effective in reversing the impacts of opioids and saving lives, and it's really easy to use, so we'll talk about that today. Here. I'm a little scared of this thing. Is that better? Should I hold it? Okay. Carol, I don't have very many slides about the pre-naloxone stuff, so it'll probably just be this and we'll dive in. So I see some folks have been trained in naloxone. And what is naloxone? Naloxone is a very simple medication. It's been around since the 70s, and it works on all opioids, including fentanyl, despite what you may have heard. All that it does, it essentially acts as a blocker for your brain between the opioids and the receptors in your brain that the opioids act on. So it blocks the opioids from getting to your brain cells, it reverses the effect of the overdose, and it gets someone breathing again, which is how you save their life. It's really important to know that naloxone only works if a person has taken opioids. You could give it to me right now and absolutely nothing would happen to me. It's a very safe medication. And it comes in an injectable and a nasal spray form, and anybody in Washington can use it. It's safe to use, it's easy to use, and it's legal for people to use and to carry. I'm already to my signs of overdose. So this whole next section is about signs of an overdose. I'll talk about this, and then the panel will go, and then I'll do a hands-on demo. So how to respond to an overdose. I gave you the answers here. Usually I do a little quiz, but very easy signs to look for are if somebody's not breathing, if they have shallow breathing or gurgling, or if they're not responding to your stimuli, to shaking them or to saying their name. You're gonna want to give them the naloxone, even if you don't know if they've taken opioids. Like I said, it's not gonna hurt anybody. So when in doubt, if someone's not breathing, go ahead and give it to them. You wanna say their name, shake them, and try to wake them up, and then you're gonna give them the naloxone. Yep.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here this evening, Carol. Again, I'm Dave Hayes. I'm a lieutenant with the Snohomish Regional Drug Task Force. My employer is Snohomish County Sheriff's Office, but I'm assigned to the Drug Task Force. And I look forward to hearing y'all's questions this evening. But mostly what I'm here to talk about is just overall drug availability and what we're seeing out on the streets. You know, the Snohomish Regional Drug Task Force is a team of detectives that that target the mid to high level drug traffickers in our area and throughout our region. So we don't really focus on street level users or street level dealing. We try to go up the chain, if you will, to the higher level drug traffickers and work on drug interdiction stuff. So my detectives go out and form a relationship with a drug dealer, end up buying drugs from them, and then make the arrest later on, depending upon how far up the chain we want to work that. So it usually takes 1 or 2 operations, and then we'll go ahead and make an arrest, depending upon the situation. So we're here tonight largely to talk about fentanyl, although I am going to talk about a few other drugs, just to make you more fully aware of the overall drug availability here in our community. But when it comes down to what's having the largest impact on our community here in Granite Falls, throughout Snohomish County, throughout the state, it is fentanyl. Fentanyl is causing more overdose deaths than any place else or any other drug really in the world. But there really are other drugs out there that are causing overdose deaths, just the overdoses look different because it's with a very different type of drug, usually methamphetamine or cocaine. But the availability of fentanyl here in our community and statewide is really indicative of the price. So, the cartels unfortunately are capitalists, so they work on the same level of availability and pricing that most other retailers do, unfortunately. So if there's a low availability, the price is high. If there's a high availability, the price is low. Right now, depending upon the amount that my detectives buy, we can buy fentanyl M30s out on the street for as little as $1. Sometimes even less than that. Down in California, they're buying them for as little as a quarter, so 25 cents. So that tells you how available fentanyl is out there in our community. So if we buy a huge amount, we can get lower prices, but typically, somebody that's suffering substance use disorder or just buying a fentanyl pill, usually around here they'll pay anywhere between $1 and $2 for a pill. And to speak a little bit to how people have become so used to taking that drug, their resistance to the drug has gone up so much. We're talking to street level people who are addicted to fentanyl pills that are taking upwards of 60 pills a day. 60. Whereas any normal person who would take 1 or 2 pills might die. The DEA had that statistic last year that said, gave a number, I believe it was 6 out of 10 pills, illicit M30 pills out on the street contain a fatal dose of fentanyl because it takes such a tiny amount. But we have people out there on the street that are smoking 60 of them a day. That talks about how high their level of resistance is to that drug. But as I mentioned a moment ago, there's a lot of other drugs out there on the street. Most commonly, when you talk about overdose deaths here in Snohomish County and throughout Washington State, most of the people who die from overdose deaths have multiple drugs in their system. It's usually a combination of fentanyl and methamphetamine, but we're also seeing more and more cocaine-related overdose deaths as well. So cocaine is making a comeback, unfortunately. Those are the 3 primary drugs in our community up around here in the Snohomish County region and statewide. But I oftentimes get the question of, well, what's next? It's like every time we turn around, fentanyl was the big new thing that's causing all the huge overdose deaths. And I get questions, and I'm really literally paid to be able to predict what's coming next. And we've all heard of Tranq or xylazine, maybe. Xylazine really made a landing on the East Coast, and it's really back in Philadelphia, Virginia, Ohio. It has wreaked an absolute havoc and death back there. The thing with xylazine is it's not an opioid. It doesn't respond to Narcan or naloxone. So you can't bring somebody out of an overdose. But it's a horrible, horrible drug. Luckily, we have not it has not gotten a foothold here in our community or here in Washington State or on the West Coast for that matter. It is present. We have had a few overdose deaths in Snohomish County, but not very many. I believe it's just 2 over the last year for xylazine. That's good news, but fentanyl is still killing. For the last 12-month rolling period, fentanyl killed 217 people here in Snohomish County that we know of. But the next thing of what's coming is it's probably going to be a drug called they're nitazines, and they're making landfall on the East Coast as well. And we know that they are present here in Snohomish County. My detectives are watching for them, but the nitazines do respond to Narcan, but it takes like 3 times as much. So it's a horrible, horrible thing. Unfortunately, American people are being preyed upon, and people are buying this stuff. So just be ever cognizant of what's going on in your own community, in your own home, and we'll do everything we can to help you out with that. So I don't want to take over the place. So I look forward to your questions.
Bill, you want to talk a little bit about the fire department Granite Falls?
Sure. So again, I'm Bill Dane. I'm the Assistant Chief of Fire Department here in Granite Falls. And I've been in the community for about 41 years, been on the fire department for 33. And I've seen different trends of drugs over the decades that I've been with the fire department. This community, when I first started on the fire department, we had an infamous title of the meth capital of the U.S. Some of you might remember that. Rolling Stone magazine did a 7-page article regarding methamphetamine in Snohomish County, and specifically the Granite Falls area. And we went through a phase there, and in that time, I don't recall as many fatal impacts of those drugs at the time. Through 15 years ago, we had quite an epidemic of heroin use in the community. And again, we did see some significant impact increase in unconscious, unresponsive fatalities, calls that we went in and we could manage. But what's happening, at least in the last 5 years with fentanyl coming into the community, changed the game for us. More times our overdoses were unconscious, unresponsive. More times we had fatal impacts, fatal outcomes from these overdoses. And it took a little while. The Narcan, the introduction of Narcan into the community, the introduction of Narcan in the fire department has kind of changed the game on that drug. It has really increased the positive outcomes that we've had. Unfortunately, people who are addicted to the opioids, the fentanyls, have become predictively hostile to us trying to save them with the Narcan. Actually, about 50% of the people that we treat with Narcan will refuse care once they've become alert and are able to make a decision on their own. And so we transport less than 50% of overdoses that we see in the community. And that's difficult because Narcan has a short half-life. Its effectiveness wears off. And if the overdose, if the concentration of fentanyl that they take is high enough, once the Narcan wears off, they can have a reoccurrence of the overdose. So what we do advise is that families that experience that or people that are with users that do experience overdose, we ask them to watch them, take care of them. What is now going to be the next big game changer is the state of Washington just passed a new ordinance that will start freeing up money for fentanyl to be given to all the local fire departments, that we'll start our Leave Behind program. So if we go into a house where there has been an overdose, or going into a community where there's been an overdose and they don't have available Narcan, and the patient refuses to services beyond our initial contact, we will start leaving Narcan and then educating the people in and around these folks, so that if there is a reoccurrence, they will be able to save them. So hopefully what we're seeing is the impact of fentanyl, impact of opioids dropping as far as fatalities go. And that's, you know, it's a really good thing for the community, it's a good thing for families, and with the health district, the state, the increasing awareness of services provided for drug treatment, mental health treatment, hopefully we can work our way out of this epidemic that we find ourselves in now. So, and that's all for me, but I look forward to any questions that you guys have at the end.
My name's Amber. I'm a grateful recovering addict. I grew up out here in Granite Falls. I played all the sports. You know, I was in band. You know, was full of life, right? And how many people in here have heard the phrase that weed is a gateway drug, right? Well, it's true, and I'm going to tell you why it's true. Because, especially with teenagers, because you know, you start smoking weed and you're hanging out with a group of people, and then sooner or later comes along someone, a friend of a friend, or maybe even your friend who has something else, right? Because they'll get tired of smoking weed. And they'll have something else, and they'll talk it up and say how wonderful it is, and you should try this, and peer pressure is a big thing when you're a teenager. So you give it a try, right? And then you like it and you keep doing it. At least I did. And then somebody would come with a different kind of drug, you know? And so by the time I was 18, I had experimented with pretty much every drug out there. And, you know, of course, you know, I had favorites. But like, the thing with drugs is you do them, right? And then they're fun at first, so you keep doing them, right? And then a day will come where if you don't have it, you'll be deathly ill. Like, you won't want to move. It's like the flu times 10. Your body's crawling, you're throwing up, you're pooping all at the same time. You can't do anything, right? And so to not feel like that, you need to put more drugs in your body. You need more drugs to feel normal. But the problem is, like, the longer you do them, the more you need, right? And so your tolerance goes up, like they were saying. I started with Oxycontins, and those, you know, got taken off the market. Then I went to heroin for a really long time, and a blood, you know, a girlfriend of mine, she had to have heart surgery and have one of her valves replaced with a pig heart. And, you know, those are stronger, but they even have fentanyl powder, you know, and people are smoking it on foil. Or, you know, I've heard of people getting weed from a friend that had fentanyl powder on it, and they overdosed, right? And I've heard of people taking lines of coke that they didn't know had fentanyl in them and overdosed. Like, pretty much it's in everything now. Like, on Facebook there is a fentanyl memorial wall, And I encourage you guys to check it out and read the stories, because a 15-year-old girl thought she was taking an Adderall and she died. You know, I've seen people stop breathing in front of me. I've tried to bring them back, tried to bring people back. It's taken several Narcans to get them breathing again. And you're right, you have to watch them, because if they close their eyes, or, you know, they can go back out and stop breathing again. So from my experience, Narcan, when you wake up, so after you stop breathing, you've OD'd, right? Somebody Narcans you, you wake up, you immediately have the feelings of being dope sick, is what they call it. So your body is crawling, you feel like you have bugs all over you, you know, you're shaking, you're just super uncomfortable, you feel like you're gonna throw up over and over and over again. And so I bet you that's why people don't want continued help, because they just want to go feel better, you know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, I've been to 7 different treatment centers. It took me a long time, you know, and my parents, when I first got addicted, they were like, we're gonna fix her, right? And so they tried putting me in treatment, didn't work, you know, until like my parents went to Al-Anon and, you know, discovered that they can't fix me. All they can do is let me know that they love me, that I'm worthy, and, you know, that I'm worth it, you know? And so, like, it really helped my parents, and I got clean a couple different times. And I actually went to an Al-Anon meeting with my mom, and it was really powerful to hear how my actions were affecting my family, you know, to hear people's stories. There is a place called the Diversion Center in downtown Everett, and there's a group of cops and social workers. They're called COET, C-O-E-T, or Scout. And this group, they go out to different homeless campsites and talk to people and let them know that there are resources out there available to get help, but you can only get into the diversion center through a social worker. And I have some of their phone numbers. If anyone is interested, I can leave it with somebody here also to be passed along. But it's a safe place for an addict to go, where they're fed, they're housed, they can take showers. They offer cigarettes there, and they'll take you to your appointments, get you into detox, into treatment. And then when you get out of treatment, they get you housed in a clean and sober house. They take you out and they buy you everything you need, bedding, toiletries, everything you would need to start over, which is super amazing. And like, my addiction took me to living on the street for 15 plus years, jumping around from house to house, from town to town. And really, you know, when you've broken all your bridges, you know, and there's no place for you to go, you turn to like an animal living style, right? Because you're on the street, you have to like find whatever garbage people have left around you to build a shelter, right? You're out in all the elements, right? When it's raining, you get soaked, you're freezing cold. You know, I've known people that have lost fingers and toes because of frostbite. You know, during the summertime, there's nothing to drink. You know, you can't wash your clothes, you can't wash your hands. If you have a phone, there are hot commodities out there, they'll probably disappear, but there's nowhere to charge your phone. And when you're on the street, it's really hard, because you have to, the detox centers want you to call for like a week straight, every day, you know, so they know that you're serious. But it's really hard to do when you don't have a phone and you look dirty and people can tell that you live on the street and no one wants to let you borrow their phone or anything. You know, it's hard to get out once you're in, you know. Yeah, come here, boo-boo. But luckily, like, I met my husband actually on the street. Hang on. And he just also reminded me that it's okay. that I was beautiful, worthy, and loved, and just keep planting that seed, right? Sorry. It's okay. There you go. Look. I don't know. Okay. So, I mean, if you have loved ones that are deep in an addiction, just remind them that like they're loved and that you're here for them, you know, but you can't enable them by like giving them money and like, uh, you know, because that's just, you never know when, like, if that's going to be their last time, you know, if you gave them money and they buy something that could kill them, you know, and you'd have that guilt for the rest of your life. And I don't know, I mean, my addiction's always going to be with me, but like, I can stay on control of it. Going to meetings, you know, talking to other recovering addicts out there, you know, because your brain likes to play games on you and have you remember all the good times, you know, all the fun times that you might have had, but it doesn't, you know, remind you of all the times you're lonely, cold, sitting, you know, by yourself with nobody around and nothing to do and no way to feel better, you know what I mean? And it's just crazy how it works like that. Yeah. I don't know, I took a bunch of notes and then I haven't even looked at them because it's better just to talk off, you know, talk off top of my head. But yeah, thanks.
overcome some pretty big hurdles. So Voices of Youth is always very powerful. And anyway, I encourage you to attend. We're going to start again with Dr. Lambert, and he's going to he'll answer questions, and we will have question and answers at the end. So if you want to ask Mr. Dane or Lieutenant Hayes, Chelsea questions, Amber questions, people will be here to answer questions for you. But right now, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lambert.
Oh, there we go. Hello, I'm Jared Lambert. I'm a family medicine doctor over here at just the Granite Falls Family Medicine Clinic with Skagit Regional Health. I guess, a little info on me. Lived here about 2.5 years, love it. My boy goes to elementary school here. We came from Wyoming, and this is our home now. We love it. So thanks for having us. Thanks for welcoming us in the community. Yeah, you're welcome. I guess primary thoughts today, I guess just affirmation that yes, fentanyl is affecting our community. I have many patients that either have a history of or a current issue with opioid use disorder. And there are lots of resources at our clinic, and then also just kind of in the county at large, including Ideal Options. I don't see the representative back there, but they've been a fantastic resource for all of our patients that want to go into remission. There's lots of options, lots of medications, including Suboxone and naltrexone, and methadone is another. Suboxone seems to be the best. It's a daily medication. It's also an opioid, but it's much safer than fentanyl. What else? And then just a side note, I mean, you'll probably kind of got this picture, but the Narcan, you don't want to give just someone who has opioid use disorder Narcan if they haven't had an overdose. That's not like the treatment, that's just for if there's concern for an overdose. It does throw people into withdrawal, so. Oh gosh, what was the question? Was there a question I was supposed to answer? I don't know. But again, one of the things they asked me to prepare on, so I'll get this question or this answer kind of off, and then I guess we just open up for questions. But it's like with opioid use disorder in general, typically coming to people's lives in adolescence and their 20s and 30s, just as someone's loved one or parent who you're concerned about they may be experiencing opioid use disorder, I guess just being like open and loving and direct in figuring out if that's a part of their life, I guess is the first step there. And then also just kind of, I guess, at that point referring them to a local resource. And in addition, just as Amber mentioned, just letting them know that you love them and you're there for them and you want them to be safe. And then just kind of relaying some of the information that you've heard here today about the potential life consequences of opioids, including death. I think that was the question that I was supposed to answer. I think that was about it. Yeah.
Okay, I have some slides. Do people want slides in the background while I talk? Or you just want me to wing it? Okay. I'll figure out where to take this. I don't know where it's gonna not make noise. Is that way? Oh, will you turn yours off, Dr. Lambert?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. There we go. Perfect. I think I got it. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so. Is this thing off now? I might turn off this microphone because it's very loud. I don't know how to get those. And I think it's also really important to know that it's safe to help somebody who's overdosing. There's lots of misconceptions about fentanyl, and that you can overdose from touching fentanyl, and that you can overdose from helping somebody who's overdosed on fentanyl, and that's not true. It is very strong and it is very dangerous, but it's not going to be dangerous to you as a bystander or somebody who's helping. So it's really, really important to know. So who remembers the signs and symptoms of overdose? Stop breathing. Stop breathing. Yep. Thank you. What's the other big one? Exactly. Yep. So if you find someone, if they're not breathing, if you say their name and you shake them, they don't respond to you, you're going to go ahead and give this to them. These are two different kinds of naloxone. Usually they both come with 2 doses in each, and that's important because, like we've talked about, people may need more than 1 dose. So if someone's overdosing, you're gonna shake them, say their name, tell them to wake up. If they don't respond, you wanna, if possible, put them flat on their back so you can open up their airway. So if they're slumped in a chair, gently try to pull them onto the ground to get them flat. You're gonna take out 1 dose of the medication, and I'll show you this one. Just looks like this. All the different brands look the same, and it's got a little button that you push here on the bottom. This one comes with a needle and a syringe, and you draw up the medicine and you put it into a muscle. So this is what it looks like, the syringe, and then you'll see the little baggie with the vial here. You can get the nasal one in the pharmacy. The injectable one you typically get from like a syringe services program or another community agency. Both work great, both work the same, people can use both safely. So once you have the medication out, you're gonna put them flat on their back. You're gonna tilt their head back and put this plunger in their nose up to your knuckles, and then just push firmly on the applicator and it'll spray. They don't have to be breathing. It absorbs into their mucous membrane, so just push the button and spray it. You're gonna wait 3 minutes because naloxone takes 3 minutes to work. And like we've talked about today, if you give somebody a ton of naloxone, it's gonna make them really sick. So we of course want people to stay alive, but the idea is you give it to them slowly every 3 minutes, and then that can help them come back to breathing. You're gonna give them the dose, and while you wait those 3 minutes, you wanna do rescue breathing or CPR for them. And rescue breathing is really important, like we talked about, because somebody's not breathing. That's all an overdose is. And so until they can breathe on their own, you wanna breathe for them. So remember, they're flat on their back, tilt their head back, pinch their nose, give them quick short breaths every 5 seconds for 3 minutes until they wake up, or do CPR if that's what you're trained to do. If you call 911 now, they'll tell you to do CPR. So if you give them 1 dose and they wake up after 3 minutes, great. You don't need to give them anything else. If they don't wake up after 3 minutes, you're going to do the exact same thing with the other dose. And I'll just show you how to use the injectable in case that's what you have. If you're going to give them a 2nd dose of injectable, you see this little cap. You're going to pop this cap off. You're going to use the syringe. You're going to drop the whole dose, the whole vial, and then you're going to inject it to a muscle. So the thigh, the butt, or the arm. You can go straight through the clothes. You want to make sure the phone's not in their pocket like mine. But just go straight through their clothes, put the whole medicine into their muscle. Exact same thing. Wait 3 minutes. See if it works. You definitely want to call 911 because, like we said, you can overdose again, or you may not have enough naloxone. So you can just tell someone's not breathing. You don't have to tell them they've taken drugs if you don't want to. Once you get there, you can let them know what they've taken. And then if somebody doesn't call 911, you really, like folks have said, make sure you stay with them and make sure they don't use again, because this wears off in about 30 to 90 minutes. It only lasts for a little bit of time. And sometimes people will overdose again because they still have the drugs in their system after that amount of time. So you want to stay with them, have multiple doses of naloxone, call 911. Yeah, I think that's it. Questions about any of that?
Which one takes?
You mean once, like how long to work?
Yeah, to work, well, also to grab, like, I'm just thinking about, yeah, we had a situation, totally, yeah.
What I recommend, I think is a really good practice, is to build kits that have 1 of each. So you can have 1 injectable kit and 1 nasal kit. You can give them this first nasal kit really quick, and then you can give them an injectable. There's a bunch of reasons, cost and the way it works, that I think that's a better approach. But I mean, nasal simply is a lot easier to use. So you can literally just peel this back and put it in their nose, and it's ready to go. That's it. So it's much easier than building these injectable kits. Did that answer your question?
Can you explain why the dark facts important?
Yes, thank you. It's a planted question. So good news about naloxone is that it's a very stable medication. So it does have an expiration date, but there's been studies that show it's good 30 years beyond its expiration date. It still works, so don't throw it away, keep it. And the nasal one is pretty stable storage wise, like both forms. They froze it and put it in heat for 30 days on and off, and it still works. So you don't really have to worry about temperature storage, although you should store it at room temp. The one thing that's very important with these injectable ones is they're in these little clear vials, and we keep them in amber bags because if they're exposed to sunlight, they won't work. So temperature doesn't really matter. Expiration date, it's best to have non-expired, but it still works, but really important you keep it in this bag so that it doesn't. Yep, yeah. I mean, like I said, they literally boiled it and froze it every day for 30 days and it still worked at the end of those studies. But ideally, don't keep it anywhere that's not room temp, super hot or super cold. I keep it in my bag all the time and keep it with me. But I will say, if you're usually in your car and that's going to be the most likely place for you to witness somebody who's overdosing, you want to have it when you need it. So, not the best place, but not a terrible place. That's the best place. Other questions? Okay.
And actually get them and spray them or whatever it can.
No, naloxone, like I said, you could literally give it to me right now. I haven't taken any opioids. It will do nothing to me. It doesn't have any like abuse potential. It does not addictive, none of that stuff. So it's a very, very safe medication. The one thing, like you said, is that if somebody who's opioid dependent takes it, it can make them really sick. But if you don't take opioids, it does nothing to you. It's very safe. And they actually give it to babies after they're born. If their parents get too much pain medicine, they use naloxone to reverse babies. But
If you pass naloxone to somebody and they're still not breathing or bleeding, should you be performing CPR?
yep, so the 3 minutes that you wait, you want to do rescue breathing or CPR. It's a little bit tricky because the American Heart Association recently updated their guidelines to just say everybody do CPR. But the thing is that if somebody, especially if they've recently overdosed, their heart is still beating, they're just not breathing. So if you're trained to check a pulse and they don't have a heartbeat, do CPR. And that's what 911 will tell you, but really it's a breathing emergency that's really important to address with rescue breathing. And I'll let the doctor speak to that if you also want. See, I'm not a doctor. But any other questions?
If you have questions for anyone else on the camp, any questions you have.
One last thing I'll just mention is if you work with a community group that wants to give out naloxone, and I wanted to talk to you about the Legal Heights program too. DOH gives out free naloxone, like the Community Coalition, to give out to people in your life. Like if you work at a substance use treatment program or you do outreach, you can get free naloxone from us. So if you want to talk about that, let me know. And
Is it possible to just touch the drug and get high or overdose? I've heard it on the news that overdose right now, so it's see if it touches more, so we're sure that we don't get contact or anything from.
you can't overdose from touching fentanyl. Yeah, there's lots of misconceptions about that. And it is scary, but you can't overdose from touching fentanyl. Want to add anything?
There have been local juvenile deaths, children that have died just from being around it, but it's usually like picked up in the powder form off the carpet or something like that. So what Chelsea shared about the officers who felt that they overdosed by touching it or just being there, I think that there are other factors. And I think that the medical field has done a really good job at educating people that just by touching it, it doesn't, that fentanyl doesn't absorb through the skin or anything like that. So you don't have to worry about that. But we have had local overdose deaths where there's been fentanyl powder present in hotel rooms or within a home or something like that. And we assume that that's where the child has picked it up and suffered an overdose death.
I have a question about, you know, there's a
fire department here. You found a person that is non-responsive and you give them a dose of Narcan. As soon as they regain consciousness, they get very violent in a sense because they didn't want to. They was enjoying the high, if I want to put it that way.
Yeah.
And so they, all of a sudden, and now they're responsive and they're resisting the idea that you did it. Why did you do this to me? And so that happened. First off, I want to just ask a question because this is just something that I heard. That sometimes they come back and regain consciousness and they get very aggressive. So I'm just trying to verify, have you experienced that or have you, can you speak to that?
I've not personally experienced, but I've talked to other deputies and law enforcement officers who have. And there have been incidents where people have woken up, and I don't know how cognizant people are when they come through. And so sometimes they might be in a very unknown situation. They don't know exactly what's going on and they lash out. But at the same time, some of them do get very angry because you ended their high. And just like Chelsea mentioned, some people are, I think, very resistant to Narcan because of that, because they know that, or they feel that it's going to send them right into withdrawals. And so that's why it's so important to wait that 3 minutes. So believe me, I have plenty of deputies and plenty of law enforcement officers out there who've administered it too many times too soon. And that's exactly what happens. So it's take as directed. I think that that's a very important point. But
As a private citizen, then if that happens, how do you respond to that?
just step away. Yeah, just protect yourself, step away. And, if you can, keep them in sight, but that 911 call is important on multiple levels.
There's also some instances where, and I think the doctor spoke about this, with me during his talk, is that fentanyl is often mixed with another drug, usually some kind of when we give it Narcan and have them have this alternate effect of the drug that Narcan doesn't help with. So cocaine, methamphetamine, most of the time it's a methamphetamine mix, and you'll get those. Realistically, if you find someone that is unresponsive, the first thing is to call 911. If you suspect it's an overdose, make sure, because people will avoid answering that kind of a question in the idea that they could get someone in trouble. But they want help. They want the fire department to come. So they'll say, yeah, we have this person who's unconscious, unresponsive, and they won't give the dispatch the information that they know that this is a possible overdose. And then our agency responds without law enforcement. And we end up in a situation where we're giving Narcan and having this alternate high come out and a rage. Protecting yourself is, if you have Narcan to give, making sure that you do call 911, making sure that if you suspect it's an overdose, if you're giving Narcan, I know that you're suspecting that we know that deputies are on their way, because that's the best thing for all of us. If someone comes up and they're angry after you're waking them up, definitely try to depart the situation and not negotiate, right? Because usually those folks aren't in a position to negotiate.
And I just want to add real quick, I've seen overdoses reversed in the community setting, and I do want to emphasize how scary it is for people. Like, people may have no idea what happened. They have no idea why there's all these people standing around them screaming. And so I think as much as we can, like, acting with love in that moment and saying, hey, Chelsea, you just overdosed. I gave you naloxone. I'm here. You're going to be fine. And giving them lots of space and giving them a little bit of room to breathe can go a really long way for having people wake up and know that they're cared for. So just want to throw that out there.
We have a question from the comments.
So on Zoom, a couple of audience members are asking if we can repeat the questions being asked by audience since they're not mic'd. And then the second one being that they would like to know if we can provide contact information to the people who are here today and other resources. So.
We have contact information on our email. So, let's see, this is good. If you want to reach out to me in the coalition, I can help them connect with the right person. Or if they put their email or something, we can contact those folks that are home.
Okie dokie, I will put your email address then into the Zoom chat. Thank you very much.
They feel the injustice was. Has the state addressed that?
Not in statute, not to my knowledge. So that would be, so the question was, is there a state statute that covers any sort of liabilities on the person that's administering Narcan or trying to, in a caretaking manner? I believe that there's always a community caretaking obligation. I'm not aware of any civil liabilities when it comes down to general citizens trying to help other citizens, but not in statute, certainly not on a criminal level. Do you have more, Chelsea?
Yep. So in Washington State, we have a Good Samaritan law generally about medical care if you're a volunteer community member and not acting in like a paid profession. And then we have a specific one about naloxone that says if you're acting in good faith and you're helping someone in the community and giving them naloxone, you can't be charged for like anything that happens after that. So, and I have the RCWs if you want them, but we have really good protection in Washington State that allows regular everyday citizens to give naloxone to people who need it.
Okay, so the question was about xylazine and nitazines that I mentioned in my opening comments. Honestly, I've never seen them. So, and the briefings that I've read have just been articles. But I know that they've been found present in M30 pills. Nitazines have been, and xylazine have both been found in M30 pills and in the fentanyl powder, both. So they're usually mixed with another drug because these are exceptionally strong drugs. The xylazine, if people remembers, is it's the large animal tranquilizers that veterinarians use for horses and large animals. Nitazine has been around for quite a while, as I understand as well, and it had a valid use as well. But the doctors, even Jared, when I mentioned to it, had never even heard of the nitazines before. So it's isonitazine, and it has several different analogs as well, just like fentanyl has different analogs. So there's different names to them, but most of them have that word nitazine within them. So, in my experience and all the articles and what we've experienced here, it's always mixed with something else. Okay.
Question?
As far as in the last 2 to 3 years, yes, we do. We have experienced the majority of our cases are more than one dose of Narcan.
And how many is that typically?
2 to 3. It kind of varies. When we talk, the sheriff's department carries what is a 4 milligram dose. Fire department carries a 2 milligram per dose, and so it varies. but it typically one dose in what I would say is today's fentanyl is just enough to get someone breathing. But as far as getting them back to normal, it seems to be more than one dose.
Yeah, I think what we hear a lot from community is that people are needing 5, 6, 7 doses of naloxone. And I think exactly like we've said, it's not a medical reason that they need that many doses. It's because people aren't waiting the full 3 minutes. And if you don't wait the full 3 minutes, it can take a lot. But what we've heard too is that it's taking 2, maybe 3. And most of the kids have at least 2 doses. So if you carry a couple kids, you should be good, but you don't need 6 doses. Anything, Dad?
No, I agree.
Probably gonna have to repeat 1 or 2 of those. Okay, I'm sorry. So what was the very first one? Could you repeat that? Oh, open cases and then our staffing. So open cases, I think, so I have 16 deputies assigned to the or detectives assigned to the drug task force right now. Generally speaking, they're each carrying 4 or 5 cases. It just depends on the detective at the given time. And like I mentioned before, the cases that my detectives carry are mid to high level dealers. They're not the street level dealers or anything like that. So we use our confidential sources to kind of work up the food chain, if you will, and try to get the higher level cartel level drug trafficking here within our community. But our cases take us throughout the region and even down into Oregon and California sometimes. So the Snohomish Regional Drug Task Force is the largest multi-agency drug task force in the state. And like I mentioned, our total staffing with support staff and everything is about 21, but 16 of those are detectives. But we're down staffing because just like any other, well, most industries across the US right now, workforce is so low, but particularly with law enforcement and public safety, there's a huge staffing issue across the nation. But, and not every agency in Snohomish County participates in the drug task force with personnel. It's largely made up of the sheriff's office, Everett PD and Linwood PD. Now we have 1 state patrol, 1 Department of Corrections, and then we cooperate very heavily with the 3-letter agencies at the federal level.
The very liberal state, how effective are your arrests made?
Well, we have the option of charging at the state level and the federal level. If we involve a federal agency, oftentimes we take the charges federal. But at the state level, we just have to work with our local prosecutor's office to make sure we make the best case and prosecute it for the priority that's there within the individual case. So we have. It's kind of hard to comment on that specifics because each case has its own set of facts and circumstances, but we're still relatively successful at charging possession with intent cases, especially when it comes down to fentanyl. But there's no charging difference. It's just, it's called violation of Uniform Controlled Substance Act, VUXA. And whether it's fentanyl or methamphetamine, they're both charged at the same level. Or cocaine or any other Schedule I drug. So there was a third part to that.
So the fentanyl awareness and prevention, how many times have you arrested for your actions? Before the state income?
Okay, well, if it's there's a difference between simple possession and actually trafficking or possession with intent to traffic or sell. So we're relatively successful at prosecuting the felony level crimes. the Supreme Court Blake decision and the action that the Washington State Legislature took after that made it so possession of drugs, just personal use levels of drugs, are misdemeanors now instead of felonies. So they're prosecuted within municipal courts and district courts at lower levels of the courts. And I guess I would have to, my detectives and I don't work at that level, so I would have a hard time talking about how successful people have been. And different municipalities have some of their own local laws as well. So hopefully that answers your question.
Like, I don't have any, I live in Aguilar, Wisconsin, one thing is now on pot, it's on,
Right.
like, I do a search and I have a bag full of vapes that a kid has bought from
Right.
modules where to sell, and then I have to worry, I don't know what to serve.
Well, okay. The question is, what does fentanyl look like, or what do different types of drugs or drug paraphernalia look like? And so fentanyl powder is just a powdery granule substance. So, and it's oftentimes mixed up with or looks very much like cocaine or even crushed up methamphetamine powder. Although methamphetamine oftentimes comes in shards or crystal-like looks to it. When it comes down to being mixed on marijuana, I think that there's been examples of that, but it's not that common to my knowledge, but it has happened. There's a misnomer out there that they're putting fentanyl in vape pens. I understand that to be incorrect. So when it comes down to the temperature of when the drug vaporizes, fentanyl has a very high vaporizing temperature, extremely high. Regular THC or tobacco vaporizes at a much lower temperature, whereas you can't really heat fentanyl up with a vape pen hot enough for it to vaporize. So usually you're smoking that, like what was mentioned earlier, off a tin foil or something like that, or snorting it. But the most common way to smoke fentanyl is to just smoke it off a piece of tin foil with a straw and lighter. So, but if you have an unknown white powdery substance, you can just assume that it's some sort of dangerous drug and don't stay away from it. Like as was mentioned earlier, it can't be absorbed through the skin, but if it becomes aerialized and gets into a mucous membrane, then that could potentially be trouble.
And the students, had a couple of times where students have reported that someone was smoking fentanyl back then, and they say that it has a distinct smell. Can you guys talk about that? Like, seem to know the smell.
I've not smelled it.
Yeah, and I haven't either. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Me neither. Sorry.
So the question is if we have, I don't have statistics about, I have overdose death statistics here with me, but when it comes down to the level of, or how often people overdose here in given communities or even in the state, I believe the Department of Health has some good data in that regard on the state website. It looks like Chelsea might have some comments on that. The state does have some, Department of Health, and I believe even SAMHSA has some data in that respect. But I really think when it comes down to overdoses, I think fentanyl is so much more incredibly more dangerous than heroin or any type of opioid that we've had in the past. The difference between heroin and opioid is that heroin is more a natural substance that's grown, whereas opioids are synthetic and created in a laboratory, typically for medical use. That's where oxycodone or Percocet came from before. But I think that the stuff that we have out there on the street now is so much more incredibly powerful than anything that we've had before. I don't want to command this whole conversation too much. Chelsea had something to say.
I was just going to add that we do have the DOH has a database that you can look up online and look at overdose rates. But I do think it's important to know that the most recent study of youth drug use showed that youth are using drugs at lower rates than ever before, but overdosing at higher rates than before. And that's just because the drugs are stronger and fentanyl is mixed into things that youth may take, like Adderall, if it's a fake Adderall. So I just think it's really important to know that in general, youth are using drugs less frequently than they were. The drug supply is just more adulterated than it has been in the past. And that makes it really hard for youth to use safely and, to know what they're using, which is a huge part of preventing overdose risk.
And surprisingly enough, the highest rate of overdose age group wise is 35 and over, 35 to 60, actually. That's some really surprising data to me, that the older generations are actually overdosing at a much higher rate than the lower age groups. So one thing that I will talk about, we mentioned Adderall or other types of counterfeit fentanyl pills. But so of course the M30s are made largely in Mexico. Same with Adderall or Xanax bars, Xanny bars. But one thing that I wanted to mention that I really think is important is the availability of this stuff online and how people obtain this stuff. So so oftentimes it comes down to buying it via social media. There's most people, or a lot of people, buy their drugs over social media or contacting people through WhatsApp or Facebook, not so much, but a couple of the other. Snapchat, thank you. Snapchat is very common. But there's and through the dark web if you want larger amounts. But one thing that I did want to say about these online pharmacies that are available, I know that a number of particularly younger college age kids might order up Adderall or Xanax online. And this is my advice. Don't do it. If you have friends that are ordering up or getting prescriptions for Adderall or Xanax or any other medication online, please warn them not to do that. A lot of these online prescription places are through China or India, places that are not so regulated. And even though you have to get a prescription for it, it's just you're on the phone with somebody that you don't know that's giving you permission to buy these things. And we do have instances of Xanax and Adderall being obtained through these online pharmacies that have contained fentanyl. So this is my message. If you don't get a prescription from your doctor and get it from your local Rite Aid or pharmacy, don't take it, because you don't know where it came from. So the question is, if an adult, somebody over the age of 18 or over the age of 21, sold drugs to a minor and the minor died from that. So there's a crime called, zipping out of my mind here, but it's a controlled substance homicide. Controlled substance homicides are troubling to get a conviction. Difficult to get a conviction, because more often than not, you have a willing participant in the victim, whether they're a juvenile or an adult. Now, it has been prosecuted successfully. I don't know about here in Snohomish County. Skagit County has successfully prosecuted a few controlled substance homicides and a few elsewhere in the state. but it's a difficult thing to charge and I'm sorry, it's not a difficult thing to charge, but to prosecute successfully. So does that answer your question, Miss?
Do we have any other questions?
Right. So we do have a tip line. It's through the regular sheriff's office tip line, and it'll get assigned to the drug task force if it's has to do with a delivery of a controlled substance. There's not specifically a level of Schedule I drugs that would constitute a felony or not. But just if one person sells a Schedule I drug to another person, that's delivery. So, but when it comes down to us prosecuting somebody at our level, or even say one of our deputies out here in Granite pulls a car over or finds a number of pills and they're packaged in a certain way, or maybe there's multiple packages, maybe there's cash on hand, maybe there's maybe there's scales. All of those things put together just build the case stronger and stronger. Yes. Yeah, so yes, so the question is, when it comes down to the tip line, is it safe? Yes, you can file tips online anonymously, and that's completely up to the person that's filling out the little questionnaire on the tip line. You can put your name and phone number in if you like, or you don't have to. If you have a problem house in your neighborhood where you think things are going on, and say like you live here in the city of Granite Falls or right in the surrounding region, Chief Dalton out here and his deputies will check into that house. They work with us on different cases and stuff like that. We have some resources that we're able to offer them even for problem houses and stuff like that. But the best place to work through is just calling 911 or the non-emergency line and having a deputy telephone you or come over and talk with you. That's the most effective way. If it comes to a level of being a dealer house or something like that, then they'll contact us and we'll work with them. Well, I guess you can contact them on the street or something like that, but if you make a 911 call, your telephone number is recorded from a cell phone. Yeah, so or you can just flag somebody down on the side of the road, or if you would like to talk with me afterwards, I'm happy to talk with you.
You could also walk into the Granite Falls Police Department and make an anonymous tip.
I think that's really unlikely. So make sure I understand. The question was if the same person owns two homes on the same property or adjacent to each other and has knowledge that the people living in the other home are selling drugs, can they get, not criminally necessarily, but civilly potentially? So civilly means, could you be sued for it? Yeah, you could be sued for it. Unfortunately, we live in a society where civil litigation is very common. But when it comes just having knowledge of a neighbor or somebody in a home that you own, even if you're a landlord. Actually, as a landlord, that could potentially be a crime. To knowingly allow unlawful. If it's a relative, there's always, it's a case-by-case thing. Could it happen? I'm not gonna tell you it couldn't, but I think it's unlikely.
And just to clarify, you're saying if they don't report it, and there's an incident, so they can be held liable to report it, is how I understood the question, but if they do report it, could they still face those kind of consequences?
I think that's highly unlikely. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.